All right, you guys, happy Monday. Erica Kirk, man, she really is just the moment. The speech that she gave, everybody was just wowed by her. All right, you guys, we're going to jump right into this with no introduction. There's a lot that I would like to speak with you guys about. Can't wait to hear your feedback. A lot of lies that are being put out there, narratives that I would say are half-truths or just misrepresentations entirely. And I don't really see the reason for that. First and foremost, to let you know, last week was not a dream. Charlie Kirk, my friend, is dead. And he was publicly executed. I want to make that clear. Charlie Kirk was publicly executed before the world.
The plot tightens like a noose when Candace Owens steps forward with a revelation that freezes the room. With a calm yet unnerving certainty, she claims to have held Charlie Kirk's private journals in her own hands. And what's inside those pages? Not simple confessions, but chilling echoes of a man living in quiet terror. These weren't notes meant for cameras or headlines. They were raw, unfiltered whispers from a soul cornered by something he couldn't name. Every line bleeds fear, each word heavier than the last, painting a picture too disturbing to look away from.
That young man on the cross, our Savior said, "Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do." That young man, I forgive him.
That there was indeed a woman who was with the shooter in the footage that was captured by the houses nearby the area. And for whatever reason, the FBI has not yet released or even acknowledged that that footage exists. I just want to say that I feel like at the beginning of this investigation, I was very clear. I said there will be no fakeness and there will be no gayness in this investigation. And apparently there were some people who did not take me seriously or literally, because there are a lot of little lies being told, right? Charlie gets assassinated and the very people who were threatening him reputationally and financially are now trying to memorialize.
Candace Owens doesn't just blurt it out. She confesses it like a woman who's been holding a loaded secret too long. She admits she sat with this knowledge for weeks, maybe months, waiting for the right crack in the silence to let the truth bleed through. And when she finally speaks, her voice isn't loud or fiery. It's slow, heavy, uneasy, like someone who knows she's stepping too close to a line she might not be able to uncross. She claims Charlie Kirk's diary wasn't just emotional, it was terrifyingly specific. He wrote about feeling suffocated in his own house, like invisible hands were pressing against the walls, closing in on him. He wrote about the feeling of eyes on him, even when he was alone. About how the very people closest to him were changing, whispering, hiding, pulling away. He never wrote her name, but he didn't need to. The crowd didn't miss the silence in Candace's voice when it hovered around his wife. The air shifted, spine stiffened. You could feel the room freeze. And then she revealed the most gut-wrenching detail. Those words, those desperate, fearful lines, were written just days before everything fell apart. The marriage people envied was no longer a fairy tale. It was a cage with shadows in the corners. What once sounded like gossip suddenly felt like a distress signal that no one heard. The man who once stood tall and untouchable was now revealed as someone quietly drowning. Candace ends her stream softly, but it's the kind of soft that hits harder than any scream. If people knew what he really wrote, she says, they'd never see things the same way again. It doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like the beginning of something no one's ready to face. But just when the silence starts to settle, she crosses the line. Candace doesn't just talk about the diary. She reads it, and the words land like cold steel. I still love her, but I don't know if she'll be there for me. The line rips through the air. It's not rage. It's heartbreak. Pure, unfiltered despair. A man gripping hope with shaking hands. Candace says it was never anger that haunted him, it was the quiet rot. That creeping unease when you realize your world is splitting apart and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Some believe those notes were written right before the tragedy. Others whisper they were part of a message he never got to send. Either way, it wasn't just a story anymore. It was a storm, and it was only just beginning. And then, out of nowhere, Joe Rogan adds fuel to the fire. Days before Candace spoke, he'd already cracked the door open on his podcast. Calm. Steady. No wild accusations, just sharp questions that sliced through the polished surface of the official story. He said things didn't add up. A mysterious man seen nearby. Technical gaps in the footage. A case tied up way too fast. And then the line that made people's skin crawl. Something's not right. He admitted he felt it in his gut the very day it all happened. That instinct, the quiet alarm you can't explain, spread like wildfire. And if he, an outsider, could feel it, what did that say about the people on the inside? When Joe saw the suspect's photo, the 22-year-old pinned as the face of the chaos, he said everything about it felt off. The look, the angle, the flawless composition. Like a scene built for the cameras, not a crime scene frozen in time. He pointed to the object in the suspect's hand, shiny, new, nothing like the official story. Joe didn't need to over-explain. The cracks were screaming on their own. This sounds like a movie script that got rewritten halfway through, he joked, but the laugh in the room died fast. The energy dropped into something colder. Because when he dug deeper, it felt like someone had wiped and reset the entire narrative. Clean. Controlled. Too perfect to be real. Then Candace revealed the diary, and suddenly Joe's unease didn't sound like paranoia anymore. It sounded like prophecy. Everything clicked like puzzle pieces snapping into place. And then came the shiver that gripped everyone. Joe mentioned an older, familiar figure, a shadow that's been rumored to drift through national tragedies for decades. A face that somehow always appears where chaos strikes. He paused mid-sentence like the words themselves frightened him. And then that guy was in Charlie's case, he said. The studio went dead silent. It wasn't a rumor anymore. It felt like a pattern. A ghost presence that moves from event to event, invisible but always there. People began whispering the same question. What if this isn't coincidence at all? The man wasn't some nameless stranger. Online sleuths swore they'd seen him before. Footage, photos, same eerie posture, always there in the blur. In Charlie's case, witnesses say he stirred chaos right after everything went down, screaming incoherently, drawing every camera, pulling attention away from the real scene. Days later, he was arrested on an unrelated charge. And then silence. No interviews. No statements. Just gone. Like someone flipped a switch and erased him. Candace then drops another bomb. In Charlie's own notes, he mentioned a planted figure. Someone moving silently through the storm. Someone who wasn't supposed to be seen. That tiny line changed everything. This wasn't just a man scared of his marriage falling apart. This was a man who sensed something far more dangerous circling him. And now the whole world's asking the same thing. Who was that man, and what was Charlie about to uncover before everything went dark? If the man Joe Rogan hinted at was the same one Charlie had written about, then the question shifts from if Charlie knew to how soon he figured out. Did he piece it together quietly, like a man cornered but pretending to smile? Or was it just that bone-deep instinct you can't shake, the feeling of eyes on you in an empty room? Whispers say Charlie had already spotted the patterns before it all unraveled. Faces showing up at the same places. Unfamiliar movements in familiar spaces. The subtle choreography of something bigger, circling closer. Candace called him sharp, someone who saw what others refused to see. And maybe, just maybe, that diary wasn't just a collection of thoughts, it was a map. A record of the storm building around him. The pages reportedly held names. Not random ones, powerful ones. Names whispered in boardrooms where light never reached. Candace claimed Charlie had signed off on a full-scale audit, something that could have cracked open a carefully sealed vault of hidden dealings. And just days after that signature, the ground beneath him shifted. He started moving differently, double-checking who touched his files, watching who entered rooms, falling silent like a man who'd seen too much. One line from his journal dropped like a hammer. Some people aren't going to like what I'm about to find. Short, quiet, but heavy, the kind of line that doesn't come from paranoia. It comes from certainty. Then the pieces started snapping together, a mysterious figure appearing at the exact moment chaos hit. An audit request that vanished into thin air. A diary that sounded less like fear and more like evidence. On a live stream, Candace's voice didn't shake. She didn't sell drama. She delivered a verdict. Charlie was on to something, she said, steady as a knife. And that's what made him dangerous. If someone like Charlie, the moral frontman, the man millions trusted, had been closing in on something bigger, then maybe this wasn't just about power. Maybe it was about control. And that's when the focus shifted to Erica Kirk. For years, she had been the unshakable figure beside him, the loyal partner, the mirror image of Grace. But when the diary pages began to surface, that image started to warp. What raised eyebrows wasn't her silence, it was how fast she stepped forward. Just days after the tragedy, Erica was standing where Charlie used to stand. Cameras flashing, headlines crowning her as his torchbearer. To some, it looked poetic, love reborn as leadership. But to others, it looked rehearsed. Too smooth, too perfect. Candace returned like a storm, pointing to one overlooked detail in Charlie's writings. A line that didn't name names, but cast a long shadow. Decisions are being made without me. Those words lined up perfectly with closed-door meetings Erica reportedly attended alone. Colleagues admitted they hadn't seen the couple together for weeks before everything happened. Back then it seemed ordinary. Now it felt like the first crack in glass. Candace didn't need to accuse anyone outright. She whispered one unforgettable line that ricocheted across every platform. Sometimes the people closest to you aren't standing beside you, they're standing behind you. And just like that, everything changed. The internet fractured in two. Some called it cruel, attacking a grieving widow. Others said Candace had only said what everyone was too afraid to admit. Something about Erica's composure didn't sit right. Her speeches, once seen as moving, now sounded scripted. Every blink, every pause was analyzed like evidence in a trial. Then came the dagger. Another line from Charlie's journal. "I'm not sure who's really there for me anymore." Written just days before everything fell apart. A sentence that gutted the public. If that's what he felt, who was he really talking about? Candace claimed that around the same time those words were penned, Erica had begun taking temporary leadership roles, positions she quietly made permanent after his death. None of it was proof. But when the puzzle pieces were laid out, the image was hard to ignore. An audit that vanished. A mysterious man who appeared and disappeared. A marriage growing colder in silence. A widow stepping into power, almost seamlessly. Then Candace said something that made the room go still. Some truths aren't hidden. They're replaced. And just like that, the story stopped being a tragedy. It became a chessboard. Now, years later, Charlie Kirk's death isn't spoken about like a closed chapter. It's a living question mark. A web of loyalty, betrayal, and carefully buried secrets. And standing at its center, like a figure caught in two spotlights, is Erica Kirk. Some see a devoted wife. Others see the keeper of a truth too explosive to surface. Either way, the world can't look away. Not anymore. They always said Charlie Kirk only ever picked up a pen when the storm inside him grew too loud to silence. When he couldn't trust a single soul, not even the people closest to him, he'd whisper his truth to the pages. Writing wasn't a habit. It was his confessional, his shield, his weapon. So when those private words finally spilled into the world, people didn't gasp, they broke. Because suddenly, the image of a confident man melted away, revealing someone who'd been carrying silent weight no one had seen until it was too late. Those pages didn't just sound like notes, they felt like a cry no one answered. But the fallout from Candace Owens' decision to expose those diary entries split the world in two. Some called it unforgivable, saying those pages should have died with him, sacred, sealed, untouchable. Others argued that the truth in them was too important to bury. That the world needed to know exactly what Charlie had seen, felt, and feared. And as the debate raged, something strange happened. The noise didn't die down. It swelled. Every attempt to smother the story only fed the fire. The diary had cracked something open, and there was no sealing it shut. People began combing through everything. Old reports, missing clips, blurry statements that didn't quite line up. They started comparing official timelines to eyewitness accounts, and the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. Inconsistencies weren't rare, they were everywhere. It was like someone had rushed to stitch a story together overnight and hoped no one would notice the seams. Inside Turning Point USA, insiders said the energy changed almost instantly. Conversations went quiet. Laughter disappeared. The air grew tight, like everyone was breathing the same unsaid fear. Projects were frozen without warning. Files that had been public were suddenly restricted. Meetings moved behind locked doors with no records, no paper trail. It was as if someone had drawn a line in invisible ink and whispered, "Stay silent or be next." Candace, despite the storm, insisted she was honoring Charlie's voice. "I'm not trying to stir chaos," she said. "I'm saying what he couldn't." But once the internet tastes blood, there's no turning it off. The story spread like a living thing, one podcast at a time, one clip, one post, growing louder with every retelling. And instead of clarity, every new thread made the story darker. Facts blurred into whispers. Rumors tangled with receipts. But one truth rang through. There was still a missing piece. A final chapter that someone had torn out. Candace ended one of her streams with a line that stopped the noise cold. If Charlie wrote it, we owe him at least one question. What was he trying to tell us? Some say Charlie was just exhausted, that politics and pressure cracked him. But others, they swear he saw something real, something bigger than him. And that's what terrified him the most. His diary now reads like a warning, a trail of breadcrumbs scattered through power, secrets, and shadows. Deleted emails, closed-door meetings with no notes, key staff members who quietly disappeared without explanation. Each piece is small on its own, but together, they form a shape no one can ignore anymore. Candace may be hated, praised, or feared, but one thing's undeniable. She kicked down a door that powerful people wanted bolted shut. And once suspicion slips into the public's bloodstream, it doesn't fade with polished statements. This isn't just about gossip anymore. It's about what Charlie might have seen coming. A truth so sharp, so dangerous, it cost him the one thing he couldn't protect, his time. And now one question hangs in the air like a storm cloud. Was Charlie Kirk trying to warn us? Or are we just too late to hear him? What do you believe? Did he stumble upon something massive? Or is this all a tragic twist of fate? Let me know in the comments. And make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because in a case this explosive, every new clue can flip the entire story on its head.